was so significant for people to have an organized way to invest in each other personally around things that help lift the burden of stress, strain, and just the problems that we bear. Now you see people kind of giving each other the, smile, wave, and engaging, and it's kind of reduced some of those barriers. We want our people to be healthy and motivated and excited for themselves and their life and who they are. Those things currently don't exist in a way that everybody has access to, and we're trying to change that.
Welcome to the Stories for Action podcast. This episode is part of the Life in the Land Project, which is a series of films and podcasts produced by Stories for Action, which hears from folks that interact with the complexities of Montana's landscapes and communities, speaking to the value of locally led, collaborative, and holistic approaches. I'm your host, Lara Tomov. This is the first of 2 podcast episodes, which will accompany the Life in the Land film that came out in March, the episode on the Mighty Few, which is a district of the Crow Reservation, home of the Crow Nation in southeast Montana. The film, and these 2 podcast episodes, look at how this community is strengthening their connection to identity, the land, and community togetherness. Through truly grassroots efforts, the Mighty Few are guiding action that creates necessary healing, economic opportunities, and self-determination to thrive into the future. We hope this content elevates and supports the work specific to the Mighty Few, as well as provides relatable insight for other communities engaged in rural development. Full disclosure, I myself have personal connections to some of those featured in the film and these podcasts. And I've been fortunate to spend time in Wyola since I was a child. My mother and previously my grandfather have built relationships with and have great respect for the people and place there. That is how I originally heard about the community development work happening in Wyola. But it was instantly clear that we wanted to work with the community to elevate the story of these efforts. Not only for this community, which of course is our priority, but for other communities to find inspiration and insight. This is work that is truly community-guided, and therefore will naturally be designed to be holistic to the core. Only local residents know how to touch on health, economy, environment, social well-being, and more with a single project. Only community members know their historical and current context, their challenges, their strengths, their future vision, to pursue actions that work for them. The story here shows the importance of focusing on the local, but to remember to tap into the bigger picture of our place in the world, our relationships, socially and environmentally. In other Life in the Land content, we touch on community-guided work where there's the involvement of partnerships of large organizations or agencies. This story here shows how it can be done when you don't have a large organization working already in your area. Or, as has been featured in other Life in the Land films, this community shows how you can create momentum to attract larger entities to come in as partners and support the work. You can find the 49-minute film, Life in the Land, The Mighty Few, at lifeintheland.org, where it's available for free personal viewership and meant to be used in gatherings for communities, organizations, classrooms, anyone really, to kick off deeper dialogue around these topics. Please reach out to us through the site if you wish to host a free screening at your gathering or to find out about resources we can provide for you to hold a facilitated discussion afterwards. Today's episode on the Mighty Few will provide context of the people and place here. It will share about specific efforts taking place and show how the foundational work of community connection and well-being is critical before projects move forward on any front, from economic to environmental. Part 2 of this episode will have a focus on youth empowerment, connection to traditional lifeways, and required methods for implementing the work. So be sure to subscribe to catch the next podcast episode, that's part 2, when that drops likely next week. As a note, All of the interviews in these episodes took place in late 2022 and mid-2023 and were conducted by myself, associate producer Robin Iron, and occasionally we were fortunate to be joined by Rachel Mailbear-Stone, who provided audio and production support in these interviews. Also, as a note, for listeners who may be sensitive to the topic, there are brief mentions of addiction and substance abuse in this episode. To provide some context for listeners on Wyola, home of the mighty few, I'll pass it over to community member Jory LaFrance, who wrote the following.
We are the mighty few, who greet the peaks and valleys of the Bighorns. Elk echoing in the canyons is our favorite song. As the sun hides behind the skyline, it is the stars that remind us of who we are. Molded from the mud, First Maker breathing life into us, a perfect product from our mothers and grandmothers, remaining the same as yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We are the mighty few. Iikooshtaka'atbaatchaache. Our roots are planted within the kicked-in-the-belly band of the Apsáalooke Nation, also known as the Crow Nation.
Jory continues here with cultural and historical context.
This is a story about connection, connecting a path from our ancestors forward to our descendants. Our connection to this land and all life within it. It's about the connection that threads through us all as a community and the strength we have in that unity to determine for ourselves how to thrive into the future. We are the Apsáalooke, children of the large-beaked bird, today also commonly known as the crow. In the beginning, Iikooshtaka'atbaatchaache, First Maker, created us from earth, brought up from below the waters by a small duck in her webbed feet. First Maker gave us the gift of language and song and taught us how to live in a good way and respectfully care for all life, what we know as Imajigatua. Long ago, we split off from our Hidatsa relatives in search of the sacred tobacco seed and a place to plant Ichichia, given to us long ago by the Star people. After much traveling from the tree country near the Great Lakes area, we found our promised land in and around Bazawachawo, the Bighorn Mountains, in a place now known as Montana and Wyoming. It is here we were shown the sacred tobacco plant and its ceremonies that would help us prosper as a people. Our homeland stretches between 4 poles. North from the Bear Paw Mountains, east to the Black Hills, south to the headwaters of the Wind River, and west to the Gallatin Range. It is here that our people became Beluga, our side, where we flourished, stewarding this land and all beings that in turn provided us with what we needed. When we acquired horses from the Shoshone, we became an accomplished horse people. We could follow and hunt bison more efficiently, travel further and faster, and our warrior culture thrived. As predicted in visions from our leaders, settlers came westward and our lives changed forever. During the mid to late 1800s, the once plentiful bison became almost extinct, food was scarce, European diseases killed more than half of our people, homesteaders moved in, and threats from enemy tribes pressured the Apsáalooke from the east and south. Several treaties were signed with the U.S. government that radically reduced our territorial land and restricted the Apsáalooke to a reservation. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Crow experienced extreme and devastating change imposed upon them by the U.S. government, whose strategy was to assimilate them into the now dominant Euro-American society. With the Dawes Act of 1887, the federal government divided our reservation land into individual plots to encourage us to practice agriculture and break up our communal camps and nomadic ways. Traditional social gatherings were discouraged, and Crow cultural and spiritual practices were forbidden. Our children were forcibly removed from their families to attend boarding schools, and further attempts to erase our customs and language and learn white ways. This was a time of survival, and the impacts of federal policies on our people are still present today. As we struggle with intergenerational trauma, systemic cycles of poverty, and separation from our communal social structures. But through our Apsáalooke strengths of perseverance, adaptability, and vigilant leadership, we have maintained tribal sovereignty, and many of our traditional lifeways still continue. At the same time, we have found ways to incorporate learned skills to best serve our people in the 21st century. The Apsáalooke Nation is made up of 6 districts. One of the least populated is the District of the Mighty Few, Iikooshtaka'atbaatchaache. We are Mountain Crow, from the Kicked-in-the-Belly band of Apsáalooke. The Mighty Few earned and have proven our name in a variety of ways, from arrow-throwing competitions, resilience through tough times, and as the protectors of the southern flank of Crow Country.
Again, that piece was read by Jory LaFrance. Now, just to give some physical context, Wyola, the hub of the Mighty Few district, lies between the Bighorn Mountains and the Wolf Mountains, at the southeast corner of the Crow Reservation, a 90-minute drive southeast of the city of Billings on Interstate 90, and only 9 miles north of the Wyoming state border. The low hillsides surround Wyola with soft angles like the bodies of thin giants laying across the land. A serpentine of increased vegetation and cottonwood trees weaves through the valley, showing the path of the Little Bighorn River. Ranch lands and hayfields are spread throughout, run by tribal and non-tribal members alike. Wyola itself consists of a cluster of homes, many whose original frames were built before the 1940s. The only public buildings are the Wyola School, which is kindergarten through 8th grade, the small post office, a couple of churches, and the community hall. The hub of Wyola is about 2 blocks wide by 3 blocks long, and the blaring of a train horn is a staple atmospheric sound here, with a major freight line passing right through town. Otherwise, it's quiet here. Only a portion of district members live here in town, while others live spread out in the hillsides. Many working-age community members don't live here in the district at all, as the current lack of job opportunities and housing gives folks little choice to stay. The horse culture is strong here. It's common to see folks of all ages, especially kids, riding down the main street in town or the frontage road bareback on Shetland ponies or standard-size horses. Here now is Bill Yellowtail, an elder in the community, a cattle rancher, and former Montana state senator. I spoke with him above his home, which is a long drive on a dirt road outside of Wyola. We sat on a prairie slope above his house in the shadow of the red dirt cliffs. With the sun nearly setting, shadows lengthened against the nearby ridgeline of the Bighorn Mountains.
This red rock and soil is deep in my identity and my soul. This is home, but it's not just home to me. It's home to my ancestors. And just down the Bighorn Mountains here, 50 miles, is Clouds Peak, where the leader was shown the sacred tobacco, and which defined our territory from the Black Hills to the Teton Mountains, from the Missouri River down south to the Wind Rivers. That's Crow Country. In that sense, this is homeland forever. We, the Crow people, have defended this heartland with absolute determination ever since. While we welcome people to come in, which is a Crow custom, by the way, we're a very accepting culture. On the other hand, we want to make sure that everyone understands that this is Crow Country.
Now we hear from Leslie Jackson Capote, Wyola community member, a housing commissioner, a board member of the Wyola Development Fund, which we'll touch on more later, and her husband Paul run an entity called Indigenous Collaboration, which facilitates and consults internationally with Native communities, tribal governments, nonprofits, and more on initiatives that contribute to the well-being of Indigenous peoples. Here, Leslie speaks about a historical role of the Mighty Few.
You know, we were the battleground of protecting, the southern flank of Crow Country. That was the job of Iikooshtaka'atbaatchaache. We have the Shoshones and the Arapahoes and the Lakotas and all of them wanting to come and have access to this beautiful land, and it was the Mighty Few who held them off.
Now we hear from Bill Backbone, a community elder, as we sat with him in his living room in Wyola, and he shared stories about the Mighty Few community. Here specifically is a story of how the Mighty was added to the name Mighty Few.
This, like I said, was a small district. They just used to call us Iikooshtaka'atbaatchaache, those that are few. They started competing in the hand game tournament, and there was just a few of them, but they sang their own songs. Ed Littlelight, who was recently passed on, he told us that that's how the Mighty Few got their name. He said, look, they were visiting and everybody watching them play, and they were playing some big districts with maybe 50 people on the other team, and there was about maybe 15, 20 on the Wyola team. But there's just a few of them, but they're doing good. And that is how the Mighty got added to the district of the Few. Before there was very many cars, maybe 2 or 3 people around here had vehicles. They all depended on horses or wagons or something to go anyplace. They grew their gardens, they grew their own crops, they raised their own cattle. They survived like that. And people would say around spring, the Wyola district, those that are few, will go and check on them, see how they're doing, and they'd come and they'd be prospering, and they banded together, they helped each other, That is how they survived harsh winters.
Now we hear from one of the 3 district senators of the Mighty Few district, Senator Harold Mailbear Stone. Here he shares memories of growing up here in Wyola. What he shares is a testament of the horse culture that's interwoven with the Crow and this community.
I used to ride horse all over the place here. Just get on my horse and go to the foot of the mountains. Used to ride the lodge grass and just ride horse all over the place.
Here is Senator Brandon Goodluck, another district senator from Wyola.
When we go somewhere, we leave out of state, or we see the Bighorn Mountains, and we see that, and we know that's where our home is, and we're coming home, and there's no place like home, And we know that this is Crow Country, this is where God put us, and there's always a time for me when I'm out there with my family, or if I'm by myself, I pray, bring good things to our community, and I always, that's always on my heart all the time. You have buffalo, you have elk, you have deer. We have a lot of good rivers to fish in. So that's what I instill in my family, is to have respect for our land and our community.
Now here is Beverly Whiteclay, Mighty Few community member and board member of the Wyola Development Fund.
This is where I grew up. I know I couldn't live anywhere else. It's so beautiful here. I've traveled all over the place too, but it's so good to come back home. I feel like it's majestic here. The drive up to the Bighorns, the red land there, it's just so beautiful.
Here, Beverly shares some words in the Crow language in reference to the landscape here.
Iikooshtaka'atbaatchaache. This land is sacred, and it is very beautiful. And the water is one of our sacred elements of life. It's called Sacred Waters.
Now we hear from Bill Yellowtail again, as he recalls elements of Wyola from when he was a kid. What he describes matches other accounts and photos I've seen of Wyola from the 30s through to the 60s.
When I was a youngster, our community was a thriving little commercial center for our end of the valley, and then along come fast cars and good highways, and our economic base has moved away from us. Now we can get in the car and be off to one of the bigger towns north or south. So our local communities, a bank, a lumber yard, couple of hardware stores, I think 3 grocery stores, a barber shop, all of those are merely a dim memory to us. So now we're in a time where we have to rediscover and re-engineer how we function.
These changes in economic presence is largely due to the 1987 construction of Interstate 90, which now allows folks to zip past at 90 miles per hour plus. I-90 now runs through the Crow Reservation and is a major travel corridor for semi-trucks and travelers. Before 1987, at least since the early 1900s, the main road in this part of the reservation was what is now the 2-lane frontage road. So back when cars were slower on a slower going road, Wyola was a likely stop for anyone traveling through, meaning that folks would at the very least stop at the gas station, which no longer exists here. For local residents, back when the drive to larger cities took more time, having local shops in Wyola was essential. Of course, this dynamic describes the fate of countless rural communities across the country, whose economic drivers were dramatically upset with the construction of larger highways, especially when they were just far enough from the interstate for passing drivers to not even know the town was there. In Wyola's case, a large hill blocks the visibility of town from the interstate. Now we hear from Ariana Smith, who's the head cook at the Wyola School. She's also a mother and a Mighty Few community member who's born and raised here.
I love my reservation. I love my people. I love my community. It's just home. It is where your heart is. I didn't ever want to move away. I love my community so much. Our adults are really into the children and trying to keep them busy. And they do have more things going on for our kids. You know, Tubby has his youth program and he takes the kids swimming, boating. And I'm glad they get to do that. Growing up, you know, they focus more on the other communities, like the tribe, you know, more on like Lodgegrass and Crow, and it seems like Wyola was always left out.
Ariana speaks here about connections to the land that remain for her kids.
We go to the river. Well, I live right by the river. You know, they ride horses all the time. My son usually walks up the river every day, and he just starts a fire right when he gets home, and he cooks his fish. Yeah. You know, it's just very free here. You know, it's just a small community. Our friends grow up to be family. You know, all us kids used to go in front of the school and play like kick the can. We'd all saddle up horses in the morning in the summertime. I want my kids to have that, what I had, what I have still, because all of my friends are still my friends. They're all still here. I mean, I guess half of them, after a lot of things, you know, after addictions, caught some of them, you know, car wrecks. But for the most part, most of them are still here, and I'll remember the rest and all the fun we had growing up here.
Addiction and substance abuse is a difficult reality here. Of course, this is an ever-increasing reality everywhere, especially as more types of addictive substances become available. But the high ratios of addiction here stem from a variety of elements. Here now is Grace Crow, an elected commissioner of the Mighty Few Development Authority, which is an entity we'll touch on later in this episode. But Grace speaks here about some of those realistic challenges.
There's a lot of, like drug abuse, alcoholism, and then that goes from past trauma, you know what I mean? It just it goes deep. You see the grandparents raising the grandkids. And I don't know, I'm speaking from experience, from myself. I just completely changed my life, over 15 years ago. What I see with for my generation, and I think is depression. People don't talk about it. Just generation after generation. It's like a generational curse. You have to be that one to break it.
Grace goes on to mention the need to speak more openly about the difficult but honest topics. confronting it for the sake of young people, to give them outlets and people to talk about it with, if the continued cycles are ever to be broken. Here again is Ariana, speaking about her own experience.
I always think about how far I came, how things could have been but aren't. Both my parents, I blame alcohol for dying. I'm glad I didn't go down that way. I could cry around like, oh, my parents did this, my parents did that, but they showed me how not to be, how to make better choices from the choices they did. I don't drink. I stay home. I take care of my kids. Like they do say, trauma does get passed down, especially with like the boarding schools. My grandma got sent to a boarding school. She ran away and went home, and she just always knew she wasn't going to go back. So I think that, it does really have a lot of, trauma in our families, trauma passed down, has a lot to do with addiction too.
Bringing up the topics of the realistic challenges and pressures here, which are relatable for many communities, is also to show the value in the community-guided responses that are taking place, which is the main focus of these podcasts and the Life in the Land film episode. Those responses include things that benefit community spirit, youth empowerment, creating alternative paths to those which entail substance abuse. It's also about creating economic opportunities. Ariana speaks about the current lack of economic opportunities, as well as lack of housing in Wyola, which is a contributing factor to the middle generation not being as present here. Because for many, for more employment opportunities, they have to live at least as far as Billings, which is a 90-minute drive one way from Wyola. Again, Ariana works at the Wyola school as the head cook.
This is basically the only place that has employment is the Wyola school, besides the post office, but they only have one worker. If you have to work, you have to go either, to Hardin or Sheridan, which is 45 mile drive every day. Oh, and that's half your paycheck is gas now. Because there is a lot of community that wants to work, that have kids, or some of them can't go that far. How a lot of people around here, they want a car, but they can't get a car because they can't have a job, but then they have to travel. There's a lot of people that do want to move back, that moved away, but just can't because there's no more housing. No one can have a place to come home to.
Here again is Leslie Jackson Caboti, speaking to the reality of the community. And when it comes to shaping the future vision for the community, to frame things in an abundance mindset rather than one of scarcity, acknowledging what is here, what skill sets do exist, what things are realistic and appropriate for the community, and how to elevate those things.
So some of the challenges that we have in Wyola is that we are one of the smallest, if not the smallest, district on the reservation. We have about 54 households, but primarily our demographic is that we are elderly people raising grandchildren, because that middle section of the population who provides for their families are out. And we are 35 miles from the center of the nation's capital. We are such a small population that we are often left to have to fend for ourselves. It's like the trickle down doesn't get to us. And so it's really critical for us to be able to not bemoan our reality, but to recognize that we have a significant portion of our population are capable of doing some things. We have children, we can raise them up in a way that prepares them to be a part of a flourishing economy, and we have experience, knowledge, cultural insights of our elders to offer them insights. What we just need is to be organized and to have our intentions driving the way that we develop our systems, our opportunities, and all of those things. And so while on one hand we're at somewhat of a disadvantage in our nation size-wise, the other side of that same coin is we have a distinct advantage of being small enough that our intimacy factor is really great. And if we can unify around that, we can reclaim that identity of being the powerful, mighty few. And that's something that we're working on, trying to amplify that in people's imagination and image of what our possibilities can be.
In response to seeing a need to lift up the future of the community and the need to organize these efforts, in 2018, community members established the Wyola Development Fund. This is a nonprofit entity with a mission to initiate economic programs and projects that serve the needs of the Mighty Few community from within. Here again is Leslie.
The first thing we did to kind of understand where the community was at was we did this survey, and we surveyed all of the households, and it was a really broad survey inquiry about, what are the things you think about the community, your place in the community, all of these kinds of questions. And people said, we don't know each other, we don't like each other anymore, we have things that have happened, petty things that have happened in the past, that because there's no bigger thing for us to do together, we hold on to that. And we're all isolated and suffering alone. We had some resources come in through housing, and the conversations we were having was, how do we deploy those resources into our communities to help people who otherwise don't have any help? The idea was, rather than hiring outside contractors, let's buy the supplies and materials, find out who knows how to do what, and this person knows how to do some plumbing, and this person knows how to do windows or carpentry. We'll do a community service exchange where this person can get their needs met if they help this person do something. And in that way, kind of create the process for people to be working alongside each other and accepting help and giving help in a way that everybody's eager to do. We have a lot of elderly people whose homes were fixed. Well, they can't go climb up on somebody's roof and help do that, but they can feed the people. People would come, and their contribution was to provide a lunch to the workers. For my part, my role was to just keep the roster of who's coming, what kind of help do they need, what kind of skills do they have, who's helping who, and kind of keeping everybody moving along in a pathway of service. The first place we started was to clean up our town. Our first volunteers were my mother, who's 80, she was 86 at the time, some other elders who were in their 70s, and they were out there with their rakes and their buckets, and carloads full of younger people would stop. They're like, what are they doing? They shouldn't be working. It's like, you want to come and help? And they're like, yeah, go park. And then here comes a passel of kids and families, and it really was the elders, by virtue of their own modeling, that brought the others. This community cleaned up, and they hauled out 300 tons of debris from Wyola. That has been something that our community has been it's been weighing on us.
In the Mighty Few film, you can see the community photos of this work taking place, but for the sake of audio storytelling, I'll try to convey the extent of this impressive physical feat. There were community members who were trained heavy equipment operators, and with them at the wheel and other community members on the ground, they all hauled out old cars, leveled and hauled out debris from homes and structures that were in disrepair and had been sitting empty. There were issues of unknown vehicles coming in from off the interstate and driving at an unsafe speed through the central part of Wyola, where community members, including kids, may walk or ride their bikes or horses to get around. And there are no sidewalks or shoulders on these streets or roads. So another community project they did themselves was install speed bumps to keep their community safe. Community members also worked together as volunteers to clean up and create regulations for their local waste dump, which they were having issues with people coming from outside of their district to dump their trash there, and previously the contents of the dump were regularly burned as a means to clear the trash, a process that created plumes of black smoke and airborne pollution in the area. Here again is Leslie, speaking about the collective community improvement work.
It was so significant for people to have an organized way to invest in each other personally around things that help lift the burden of stress, strain, and just the problems that we bear. And it was really, really cool because now you see people kind of giving each other the, smile, wave, and engaging, and it's kind of reduced some of those barriers.
The community has been convening regular meetings, open to all district members, to identify priority areas for community development, to gauge members' interests to take action, and to assign next steps for all projects. Now we hear from Joy Yellow Mule, a Wyola community elder and an active volunteer in all of these projects. She refers to the actions being taken for local improvements and these meetings, which they hold at the Wyola Community Hall.
In the past 2 years, I think we've had a change. These activities coming on, these new projects. People that can attend, they'll attend these meetings, and then we'll know what's going on in our district. And even if there's signs or text messages or Facebook, I volunteer to do this. It makes me feel good to come out, enjoy the fresh air, That's why I do it, I want to see our district look nice. It presents yourself what you care about things, especially our district here in Wyola.
The community hall in Wyola, where development meetings and social gatherings are held, is just on the edge of town. On the inside, the main area is a very large warehouse-type space that previously had blank walls. Leslie speaks here about a project that made this a more warm and welcoming space and allowed it to be a physical representation of community identity.
So we painted the interior of the hall, and then it was like this blank canvas. It was like, wow, we should do something in here so it doesn't just feel like a bigger cell. But along the line, they have in there the lists of all of the clan associations of the people in this district, which families are like Bad Wardeeds, which ones are Whistling Waters, etc., etc.
The clan or kinship system is an integral part of Crow culture and provides an extended family beyond one's blood relatives. Members of the same clan share solidarity with one another and count on each other in times of need. The Apsáalooke are matrilineal and belong to their mother's clan, but are also considered a child of their father's clan. According to Crow custom, the mother's clan takes care of the physical and emotional needs of the individual, while the father's clan provides praise, prayer, and protection to their clan children in return for gifts of respect, feasts, and presents. In this way, the clan system promotes a sense of belonging and relationship, of physical and spiritual security, of concern for community, of generosity and respect. Each clan also has a symbol, which is the visual representation of that clan.
We said, what if we took those symbols and we painted them in the hall to represent the current and the historical presence of people that we care about, that cared about us, that we would have the symbols of that in the environment where we celebrate birthdays, we convene, funerals, and we have feeds and political events and so forth. We had that idea, kind of sketched it out, but who's gonna do the work, right? The chairman organized a youth group, and so they got the equipment out and projected the images onto the wall. The kids were the ones that etched them out, all of the designs. And then that took several weeks, and then the kids were like, I'm done with this. They had enough of that. And so then the grandparents started coming, and we had the rolls of painter's tape and stuff, and they started taping them off. And then the artists came out. And then all of a sudden you could see it. When you could see the colors and you could see how it was going to be, it was just like magnets. All of the people who have any kind of artistic inclination, whether they're beaters, painters, whatever, came out. And that place was full of people, full of music, full of positive energy that was tied with art.
The community held a poster contest for an image that could represent the Mighty Few district. The submissions had to include elements that were inspired by art and cultural insights from community members. The winning poster was created by Todd Amiot Jr., a local boy who was 12 years old at the time. The poster depicts a Crow warrior from behind on horseback as he looks out over the valley from the heights of the nearby mountains. Really, it could play for any point in time. Leslie speaks about that image here.
This is the image that's tied with representing this district. We were the battleground of protecting, the southern flank of Crow country. That was the job of Iikooshtaka'atbaatchaache.
The poster design inspired a large mural, high and centered on an interior wall of the community hall. Artist and Wyola community member Wesley Stewart was the principal artist of this mural.
We want to have this Crow warrior presiding over the things that are happening here in this hall, in this community, to have people asking questions, and especially the younger ones. This is our history, this is our place, and this is a part of who we are. The first event that we had there, we had a slideshow presentation to kind of share the needs assessment back with the community. And the presentation was over, the food was gone, and one of the community members came up and she said, "Leslie, this has never happened before. Look around you." And I looked, and there were still tables full of people sitting there drinking coffee, visiting. She said, "This has never happened where the event's long over, the food's been put away, and people are sitting around visiting." And she said, "This space is so beautiful. It feels good here. It feels good to be together in this space."
Here again is Joy Yellowmule, who was a key volunteer in painting the murals of the clan symbols.
We're proud of our community hall, because we take care of it. And the best thing I liked was helping paint, do the drawing, talking to the people in the community, and having little potlucks. It was really fun, and I know the community enjoyed it too.
Here again is community elder Bill Backbone.
They had each clan paint their own emblem up there to give them more awareness, to be proud of their clan, to be proud to be an Apsáalooke. Later on, they're going to have a storytelling session in the evening or so. They're going to have a potluck, and they're going to have members of each clan sit there in front of the children and relate stories to them.
Indeed, that following winter, they held clan story sessions in the evening. At each session, elder members of that clan would sit and share stories that belonged to that specific clan. They had the lights in the hall dim, aside from a couple of lamps and bison rugs on the floor for kids and community members to sit and listen. The setting was to replicate being inside the teepee, gathered around the fire, the setting where stories were historically shared and passed down through generations. That poster design we mentioned earlier that inspired the mural also inspired the design for Mighty Few District flag, which Wesley Stewart was the principal artist for as well, and Paul Cabote was the technical designer on. When the flag was approved by the Greater Crow community, this became the first customized flag to symbolize the distinct history of a district within the Crow Nation. Following an induction ceremony, this flag is now displayed in the Crow Nation Tribal Council chambers to represent the Mighty Few district. Now we hear from Betty LaForge, Wyola community member, whose job post is in the community hall. Her position is part of the Apsáalooke Service Corps, which is a Crow tribal program, and involves Betty helping out community members as needed, including delivering medications for elders or delivering newborn care supplies for new mothers in the community. She shares with me about the changes and improvements that she's seen in the community.
And the past few years that I've been here working, there's a lot of change, and it's a new beginning. for us to be our independent, and that's what we wanted to do for this district and try to keep our town clean. The young people are helping out the elders. It's kind of like everyone helping everyone. It seems like everybody is really proud of what's happening to Wyola. I've heard compliments about how Wyola is keeping their town clean.
Now we hear about another project that the Wyola Development Fund and community members have been moving forward, something that benefits both public health and safety, and fosters connection to community and the land. Leslie speaks here about a motivating factor for this project.
Wyola is a really small and isolated community, and a lot of the things that other places have, we don't have here. One of the things is law enforcement or public safety. And so we feel that isolation and the risk of our populations, trafficking, and we have, people that are coming to hunt our children. And that happened a couple of summers ago. And the only clear walking place for our women and kids and young athletes is out to the interstate, which is where, there's a lot of menacing things happening there.
Human trafficking in general is a reality in this country and in Montana at a level that may shock some people. For Native communities, this topic is unfortunately not new or distant, and disproportionate amounts of Indigenous people are targeted for this and other violent crimes. The movement to combat this epidemic, MMIW or MMIP, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women or Indigenous People, has been coming more into the public eye thanks to decades-long advocacy from within Native communities. With the nearby interstate, proximity to the state border, and jurisdictional gray areas, this region is targeted by traffickers. As Leslie mentioned, the only clear area for people to walk or jog is on the frontage road, including a cutoff road that leads directly to the interstate. Early on, while I was in Wyola, just in one afternoon, I saw 2 high school-age youth jogging along this frontage road. It made it immediately evident that yes, there was a demand for a safe space for people here to get out and move and exercise, whether they're a student athlete or anyone of any age. There is land surrounding the community hall which is undeveloped and is nice open grasslands with a large treed area on one side. This land was set aside for the community's use. Leslie speaks here about the initial brainstorming of what to utilize this land for.
We started talking, and by we, I mean myself on the Housing Commission and the legislature and some of the community members. We started talking about what can we do. And we decided a walking path would be the first thing that we could do that would create a safe, enclosed place for our women and children to walk, and athletes, if they want to run or jog or whatever, they don't have to go to the interstate. They don't have to be put at risk. Then we started talking about the things that it does to help people get out of their homes, start spending time together, walking, strolling, and it really creates an opportunity for people to be together in ways that we're not together in a very just natural, accessible way. But the walking path is really, I think, representative of doing what we can do and not being arrested by all of the things we don't have or we can't access. We borrowed equipment from our housing authority, and one of our senators, Mail Bear, he's a heavy equipment operator, and he said, well, let's just cut the path. So it took a year, the path got cut, and then we have now community members that have come out to spread the gravel, and it's slow, but what's important is that it's the members of the community that are doing it themselves.
Other than the path, it's true that the only roadways around Wyola have no shoulder, have speeding traffic, often large trucks, and the roadways cross very active railroad tracks. This walking path, enclosed and off of the main roads, and surrounded by natural elements felt inviting. And without it, there simply wasn't a similar safe space for folks to get outside and have a place to be physically active or socially connect in an active way. Things that many townships may take for granted. Just in my brief time there, even though the walking path was not yet 100% complete, I witnessed firsthand the physical and symbolic impact that this walking path had on the community. Multiple times I saw a young family ride their horses along this path. A couple of teenagers were then walking along it. Community member Kim was out there on a front-loading tractor, spreading and compacting the gravel along the path. Someone else came out to check on the condition of the new tree saplings planted along the path. And this is only the beginning. The vision that the community has for this area includes many components. The eventual fruiting of the young trees that are planted here, an area for craft markets, arrow throwing tournaments, maybe even a public campground for travelers. In all of these community improvement projects, Leslie says how skill sets of community members became evident, when perhaps they don't typically even have an opportunity to show or utilize these skills.
And what we found is that we have a lot of interest and a lot of talent, but we don't have that organization to deploy those abilities and interests in a way that produces results that are exciting and meaningful to people.
Leslie speaks here about yet another added benefit of the walking path, of creating an opportunity for community members to connect to the land, something that was everything for their people for millennia, that realistically today, not everyone has access or the means to get out on the land.
Our population is mostly grandparents and children. The children, their lives are kind of small to the housing cluster if they don't have people who can take them to the mountains and, do lots of vigorous stuff with them. Rather than going all the way up the canyon to where the fruit and stuff is, our traditional plants. We said, what about if we planted those trees and brought that back here? Because a lot of the farming and stuff around here has eliminated the natural growth of, chokecherry tree clusters and all of these kinds of things. And we had an individual, Jamie, who came out of the Department of Natural Resources, and she said, all of those things, indigenous plants to Montana, we have access to. And we're like, oh, we like some chokecherries, buffalo berries, some plums, all of those kinds of things. And she was like, we can bring it.
Wyola community members, through ongoing partnerships with the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation and Western Native Voice, have planted varieties of indigenous fruit and shade trees along the walking path. Leslie referenced Jamie, who is Jamie Kirby, the program manager for the Urban and Community Forestry Program, which is a program of Montana's DNRC. The program provides free of charge technical, financial, and educational services statewide for forestry in Montana's urban and rural community areas. The presence of trees in urban areas and communities of all sizes creates endless benefits, such as better air quality, natural cooling in warm months, and therefore energy conservation, as well as habitat connectivity, reduced stormwater runoff, carbon sequestration, improved mental health for residents, and more. I wanted to speak further with Program Manager Jamie Kirby, as the approach of this partnership seemed to be non-extractive. In my conversation with Jamie, she shared how in the years of her work, she's learned that the impacts go well beyond what can be measured through Western science, to include these immeasurable elements such as enhancing cultural connections and community pride. Montana's Urban and Community Forestry Program has shifted from the parameters that its counterpart in other states holds, to not only include cities or large towns. Montana's program provides their service now to rural, even unincorporated towns and communities, including tribal communities. Jamie begins here, explaining how her work with Wyola has influenced the way which the program works with and defines communities.
because of some of these recent experiences and project work, like with the Mighty Few, I have re-examined and took a new look at how I do approach my entire program and how I look at urban and community forestry as a whole. And in fact, the impacts from this have reached beyond Montana, and a lot of my colleagues and coworkers from other states are asking about how we do better work and change our program work to fit our tribal nations better. As even the Arbor Day Foundation, who runs the Tree City USA program, has been working with me to redefine what it means to be a Tree City USA, so that it hits more like a tree nation, that it hits a community in a better way, in the sense that they can still feel that ability to be part of these large programs and get assistance, and that we better understand how we are looking at communities.
I appreciate hearing this from Jamie, because as with any program tied to funding, I understand there have to be parameters and ways of measuring impact. But it seems like in practice, the requirements for programs or measuring impact don't always align to the customized needs or ways that a certain community operates. So it's refreshing to hear an example from Jamie of how parameters and approaches can be shifted on that higher level, based upon new information coming from the ground level. I asked Jamie about her and the program's partnership with Wyola in the Mighty Few District, how it began and how it evolved. She said the partnership was first sparked through a connection made at a large multi-agency Earth Day roadshow that traveled to Crow and Northern Cheyenne communities.
We had this traveling show, put on workshops, described just a few basic things about trees to the schools and the students. And we made great connections there. So I think it was through that one of my employees was introduced to Leslie, who brought him over, and they did a few trial tree plantings of a couple large fruit trees around the community center in Wyola. And from there, I believe it was just the awesome energy, I think, that really hit that connection. I needed to make a site visit, though. I really wanted to go see. Leslie was like, come out and see us, come see what we're talking about. And I was like, absolutely. So as you know, Montana is huge. And from Missoula to Wyola alone, and making that trip by myself, I did not know what to expect, and made the trip across the whole state. I believe it took 8 hours probably, and found Leslie. She, was super engaged, and she was just like, let's go walk around. How much time do you have? And I was like, I'm here for you, as much time as you need. So we met with Senator Mailbear and walked around the walking path, and they described their vision. So you could just feel like the hope and the pride that is there within their community. And there was this, here's what we want. We want to have safety for people to walk around this path here, but we don't have a lot of shade, and we don't have a lot of local elements of benefits from trees. And so that's where I was like, well, guess what? That is exactly what I do. I think there's something to be said for relationships and friendships being part of this. This isn't just a job anymore for me. It's more of like this really personal type of work that I just see this mutual benefit that we're both getting from learning from each other.
Jamie continues here about specific requests that came from Senator Mailbear Stone, who had safety concerns about some old cottonwood trees that may be at risk of falling and harming community members or infrastructure.
He described, how they wanted to do more than just like the tree planting. So we walked over to the area where there's these cottonwood trees and talked about the, the risk and just working through that. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get some more connections here for you. And that's really important to me, to make sure that they understand, like, I'm not leaving. Like, I really do want to see this through and make sure that we build something together, and I'm right here with you as a partner for the long run. Sure. I think that made a difference in how like our relationship kind of grew from there. I love tree puns, by the way, so I'm going to use branch out and yeah. I just really wanted to fully understand the community first, and that really did make a difference in how I could better help them.
Jamie continues here, speaking about those old cottonwood trees that were a potential hazard. And this shows that this program can really be customized to the needs of a specific place and community.
What was neat about the cottonwoods is that they're huge, right? They are massive old legacy trees, and so there's something to be said and appreciated about them. And the cool additional part of my program is that we work with urban wood utilization. So with the cottonwoods, we did a special project of, I did help like find an arborist to come down, and we did remove a couple trees in that area, and we brought some equipment to the community, and it's a portable sawmill. And we put on a training with the Mighty Few and with Western Native Voice. And so last summer came over just to do a workshop with them. After chatting with the senator, he mentioned how important it was to have local pride and like potentially, can we make something from these trees? And Leslie mentioned how in the community of Wyola there's an importance for like handicap ramps and just basic fencing, and I was like, cottonwoods are perfect for that. Again, like giving a trees a second life and fully utilizing them even after they're removed is benefiting the community. So from those sawmill trainings, what we were doing was helping train to use the portable sawmill to cure the wood, to mill it, to make things like handicap ramps and simple fencing and firewood.
I love that. And it's also, nothing going wasted as the materials, but also just the process of felling it and taking it down to make a training opportunity out of that. Nothing just happens singularly, right? There's always going to be multi-benefits. I asked Jamie to share what the ongoing partnership between her and her program and the community of the Mighty Few has physically looked like on the ground.
There's been multiple planning meetings throughout the last few years, conference calls and online meetings just to get a better sense of like, how can my program best help yours? So it was a really awesome brainstorm. It was working with, again, the local knowledge and the community members and learning, okay, what do you want from your space? Because the sky's the limit, honestly. Like, we have wonderful growing space here, and then understanding the ecologies. We were able to bring through the seedling nursery here 200 trees over the last couple of years, and they're seedling style, and so we hope the smaller trees will take well and be able to grow more efficiently. We know they need to be climate hardy and very appropriate for the area so that they don't need additional, resources. So we looked into what's native to the area.
I'm starting to see the parallels between these young tree saplings and any community-guided grassroots program. Before anything is planted, looking at what is practical for a specific place. What can be done from within and not require extensive amounts of external resources or nurturing. That the first couple of years require more nurturing and care from community members and partners. But as roots establish, the tree or program can gain momentum and expand more self-sufficiently. Jamie says that when selecting types of trees to plant, it was a group brainstorm that included many factors, including the community's need for fruits and berries that were both healthy and traditional foods and medicines for their people. I asked Jamie what those days of community tree planting looks like.
It's the most fun day ever, is that we have hundreds of trees, if you imagine, like lining up against the walls of this community center. People show up and there's always food, right? And that just brings everybody together, and we just start handing away trees. And a lot of them are also giveaways for the community. So community members were welcome to come and just pick a tree or two and take them home and plant them in their yard. So we planted in the last 2 years, probably, like 200 to 300 trees around the area. It's so much fun. I just want everybody to know, like, the most enriching feeling is when you're working together and laughing and joking around and getting your hands dirty. It's a beautiful, beautiful time out there.
Here, Jamie speaks about yet another very customized service that she worked with the community to provide. Because in Wyola, the water infrastructure is limited. And at this site, there wasn't any access to water for watering the trees.
So this was, again, a difference in my program to where I'm trying to educate my other state partners in understanding there is not existing infrastructure. It's not like it's a, plant a tree and walk away and the sprinklers will catch it, right? And as you know, even limited wells some have collapsed. Living in small remote areas like this is completely different because you take for granted all these services that are right there with you. And so this is really neat, is that we designed, if you look at the community center, there's this big black tank now that's sitting outside of it. The rain gutters all divert into that big black tank, and so it's a water capturing system. So now we have 1,500 gallons right there ready to water the trees, and it's like you get one rainstorm. And from what Leslie told me, it was a success. The first time a storm came through, it was filled. So we gravity fill now to our portable tanks, and they can go out and water the trees, no problem.
That's great. So, and that shows the extent of your program too, that it's not like, oh, we only help with A, B, and C. It's like, we will look at all these different ways that we can partner to make it happen, right? Yep. And so that when DNRC or the program isn't there, it's a very community supported project from beginning to current, right? From planning it to designing it to making sure that the ongoing works for the community. And you probably see it all the time, I'm guessing, with every community, that just that reality that if the community isn't guiding the design, what's needed there, it just simply doesn't work.
Exactly. When I come in with any preconceived notions or, again, expectations, I know it doesn't work until I really learn and understand from the community. And it is so important to go and understand, build the relationships and listen first. I think a lot of what happens sometimes is that they've, like Leslie described to me, is that they've gotten so used to kind of that, like, oh, here I come, big event, plant a tree, walk away. And I know it's not like that. The neatest thing I think I've learned of this is for the children, and this is for the next generations to come. And once you get that feeling and understanding, it's like we might not see, the fruit of these trees bear in our lifetimes and see them grow to their full potential, but whoever after us will. And hopefully they'll see that somebody in this generation had that forethought to bring some, neat things right there locally into their area.
Jamie returns here to the topic I brought up earlier, of how programs and funding and impact reporting can sometimes be disconnected from the actual practical needs or methods on the ground.
I find that in government, there is this expectation that you do have results. And that has a hard thing, is that this whole grant period, it wasn't until year 4 and 5, the very end of the grant, when I finally felt like I had good relationships built, because I kept describing that it's quality, not quantity. Sure. And that was a really big eye-opener. I think I'm trying to reflect in some of my work, is that the success really is in the relationships.
Thank you so much to Jamie Kirby for speaking with us about this program and this partnership with the Mighty Few. She did want to share a message with listeners that this program, DNRC's Urban and Community Forestry Program, does serve a variety of community types and sizes, incorporated, unincorporated, and they provide technical, financial, and educational assistance around community forestry, free of charge for everybody. So reach out to Jamie and her program for anything from a tree planting project that you want to see in your community, to questions about how to prune your trees or what type of tree would grow best in a certain spot. Also, check out their site, which is linked in this episode's show notes, to find their contact info and to find out planned events or workshops that they may be holding in your area. And for listeners outside of Montana, each state has an equivalent urban forestry program hosted by your state's equivalent of the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. Now we go back to our conversation with Leslie as we walked with her along the walking path in Wyola, as she describes how community members would naturally get excited to be part of the planting process.
And the volunteers were the ones that were like, put him here, put him here, put him here. Oh, this would be a good place, because it's the volunteers that have been helping develop the whole infrastructure. It really becomes a meaningful resource for the community to get reacquainted with the parts of our life that were commonplace to our parents and grandparents that our children and grandchildren no longer have access to through no fault of their own. It's just not there.
Now we hear about another key project proposed for this area of land near the walking path and the community hall.
We have horse knowledge in this community that's unparalleled. We have community members that do Indian relay. And apparently at one time, Wyola is such a horse culture community. At one time, Wyola by itself had 7 Indian relay teams come out of here.
This additional project involves the creation of a track to be used for horse and riders competing in Indian relay. Here on that, again, is Jory LaFrance, Wyola community member.
Indian relay pays tribute to the cultural and practical significance of the horse among Northern Plains tribes. This high-intensity bareback race requires the athletic agility and fearlessness of both the horse and the rider. Indian relay dates back over 400 years, and in recent decades has been gaining mainstream visibility and popularity in the Western US and Canada.
When we started talking about what are the ways that we can create the infrastructure to support the life and the livelihood and the engagement of the whole community, we had to be thinking of the people in town, but also those community members who rarely come through town. This excitement started building, and they said we could have last chance relay here before the snows come, that they would come to Wyola and have their final race of the season. So we're like, okay, so not everybody is into races, but people bring their kids. What are the kids going to do while the races are going on? And we had a group of lads with us in a pickup. We were driving this trail and said, what about a BMX park? Keeps them away from the road and keeps them safe, but keeps them occupied in a healthy, activity. We turned to the boys in the pickup and said, if we were to do that, what would be some of the things would be important to you that it would have? And they were like, make them really tall so we could really jump off there, which immediately led to a conversation about we really need a clinic in this town. It's not a big commercial pari-mutuel racing track. It's a neighborhood track intended to serve the needs of the community. Some of it is economic, but then we started talking about the needs that our children and our families have for a pathway to regain our wholeness spiritually, emotionally, and so forth, and those disconnections that we have from the land, from the resources, from our environment and our ways of life that kept our people going for so many generations. We're getting disconnected from that. And it's hurt our spirit, and it's hurt our families and our children. And so when we talked about how do we use that infrastructure to serve the well-being of our community, it was like we could do equine therapy there when the races aren't going. There are resources out there for therapeutic services, but that's not the capacity we have. We're good at building stuff and racing horses and making things happen. So there's another nonprofit, Mountain Shadow, in Lodgegrass that is working on doing kind of a comprehensive family therapy recovery resources like housing and living and all of that kind of stuff. He said, we have horse people need to be employed here. We'll provide the track. You can bring the children from Lodgegrass, and we want our own children to be accessing that, and you guys handle the money and the resources and so forth, and we'll just operate within our means, interests, and ability. And so all of those constellation of pieces are happening. We have Padlock Ranch and also Sunlight Ranch that they do a lot of business here on the reservation, come forward with their equipment, because we have a lot of talent, we don't have a lot of equipment. So that's where we're going. And those are kind of the stepping stone of ahas that we've had about how else can we use this resource of property that's available to us in a holistic and sustainable way that's consistent with the interests and the needs of our own community members, because we want our people to be healthy and motivated and excited for themselves and their life and who they are. And those things currently don't exist in a way that everybody has access to, and we're trying to change that. And we've had help, offered to us, and we're just trying to bring that critical mass together so that we can get it done, but we know we have to do it ourselves in order to really understand how to use it, what it means to us, and that it's our responsibility to care for it.
Here is Senator Harold Mailbear Stone speaking to the benefits that the track and these facilities could create for the community's youth.
In our area, there's a lot of youth that are horsemen. They're not cowboys, they're not this or that, they're horsemen. They know horses, they know how to handle horses. We need to bring that up. Maybe they can become cattlemen, maybe they can become veterinarians. We need to install ethics in them, work ethics. The horses healing the kids, helping the kids, bringing up the kids as they work together. Knowing how to handle a horse, knowing how to take care of a horse would kind of help them at the basic level as far as helping themselves, helping another person.
Here again is Joy Yellow Mule, whose family was involved in competitive Indian relay for quite a while.
We can have like fraternities, Indian relays, invite all districts, and then whomever wants to come and join in, and that would be an ongoing thing for the next generations down, and then they can too carry the tradition on. We had horses, we'd go all over the United States, do our fraternity, Indian relays, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun too.
And here is Clinton Whiteclay, community member and horseman, whose family, generations back and forward, are avid horsemen. Robin and I spoke with him at his home, in between him showing us his impressive roping skills, as we stood in the corral with his horses surrounding him, at his attention.
Ever since I could remember, I've been riding horses, and my grandpa, his name was Charlie Red Wolf, and he was pretty much well known of his horsemanship and his horses, and growing up here in Wyola, and we used to ride to town, and we get off our horses and we throw arrows with them. That was one of the fun times I had been growing up around here, just riding horses, not going to the hills, and the horses are pretty powerful spirits, especially of the native people, and young men will go and ride their horses and go on the warpath. Some will go hunting, go to a buffalo hunt. So native people, horses are pretty powerful for them and pretty strong. There's a track building right now for the community, and I'm pretty happy that they're doing that for the kids,
Clinton continues here, speaking about the benefits of making horsemanship more accessible for local youth, including universal life skills of caring for something else and the discipline required.
My grandpa was a horseman. He used to wake us up about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and me and my cousin, and we started gelling them, the horses, because we training them to be a fast horse. We take care of them. My late uncle, and he was one of the outstanding ropers in this reservation, and they say, you guys take care of your horse. You make sure you guys, this horse is fed good. You make sure you guys exercise your horse. That's part of being a horsemanship. So I got a grandson. He's 10 years old, and he's shuttling right there, and I'm teaching him now. So maybe someday that he would pass it on to his kids too.
Now we go back to Leslie, as we walked around with her on the walking path, and she shares yet another element of their vision for this area of land. She shows us a large open field that sits between the community hall and a straight section of the walking path.
When we started talking about rodeo, then people want to talk about powwow. And we had community members who were really excited about putting up booths and having those kinds of things. And then some of the women came and said, you know what would be really cool is if we had like a marketplace. So the vision here is we could have like an alley and have it spread out and be developed, that we could do markets. People could come and sell their wares or food or bread, or if we wanted to have events here and this were all mowed, we could have a powwow here, we could have arrow throwing tournament. I mean, we could have all of those things, but we would have a designated place that people could come with their strollers, and and we could illuminate it with solar lights, and it would be small, intimate, but manageable for us to do ourselves with the materials we have available to us. This whole section right here has some really important implications for us that are not only economic but also about bringing people together in ways that we naturally want to congregate that just don't exist. We've lost the community social part that brings everybody in, and that isolation has been getting greater and greater and greater, and it's having more and more effect on our families and our children particularly, that people feel isolated and feel kind of caught in the whatever darkness they're experiencing in their lives. And this is something that we can bring people together, have joyfulness, have that experience of unity, and have fun and shop. Who doesn't like to shop? And to do it here in our own spot, that will bring a lot of joy to people.
Now we hear from Channis Whiteman, Vice Secretary of the Crow Tribe. He grew up in Pryor, a community in a different district that's on the western side of the Crow Reservation. We chat with him at a youth rodeo being held in Wyola, at the rodeo corral that currently sits in the middle of the proposed relay track. This youth rodeo is put on in partnership with an out-of-state entity, and Channis has come down to Wyola for the day and is giving some pointers to the community youth as they practice for the steer riding event.
Today I'm helping some young steer riders and future bull riders get their technique down, giving them a little bit of guidance, both spiritually and mentally.
I asked Channis for his thoughts on the proposed Indian relay track in Wyola.
If we put a horse track in Wyola, people take so much pride in this community. It will just add to it, and people from this community that run flat track horse races, they got Indian relay teams, and instead of taking their horses to a track about 40 or 50 miles down the road to Crow Agency, they can practice here. Community members get to come together and mingle and visit with each other, and that's what I see. And then it puts Wyola on a map too. Having a lot of people like coming here. I like coming here. So.
Now, to mention another element of getting community development programs to move forward is the operating mechanisms and the local policy needed to help move visions forward. Back in 2015, Mighty Few district senators proposed, and the tribal legislature subsequently passed, a bill to create the Mighty Few Community Development Authority as a tribally designated entity. The Development Authority exists to foster communication and collaboration between the Mighty Few community members, district senators, the Wyola Development Fund, and the tribal executive branch. Coordination between these entities aims to improve local infrastructure, including housing, services, and local economic drivers such as the relay track. In the summer of 2023, the Mighty Few Community Development Authority was activated through a community process. A local election was held, and the inaugural Board of Commissioners was established. Leslie speaks about that process here.
In this election, people did not come forward and say, pick me, pick me. The question was asked around the community about, given these standards of leadership and character, who would be good? Who would be a good person? And people reflected on that, and they put forward names of people that they felt were thoughtful, that were collaborative, that were deep thinkers, that were trustworthy and honest in their character. And then those people were spoken to about, this is what the community sees in you. Will you come forward and accept this responsibility? And it's a new thing. It's a new thing. It's not a popularity contest. And in that, we've also talked about how do we include young people at those tables and in that conversation, because the young people are the ones who adopt those mannerisms and those attributes and those leadership traits and can take up to completely the next level.
For millennia, the Apsáalooke have been community-centric in every component of life. In the early days of reservations, U.S. government policies such as the Dawes Act or Allotment Act forced a physical disconnect from these community-centric lifeways. Other elements since then have contributed to further disconnect. Here is Grace Crow, one of the elected commissioners for the Development Authority. What Grace speaks about here shows the reality of a need for strengthened community connectivity. That this is not a small concept, and it's really the basis of everything.
For the people in Wyola, there's a lot of kind of like past, like brokenness, and people are scattered. The community needs to come together more, and I'm hoping that me as one of the commissioners for the Mighty Few District, I can get the people, to kind of come together. Some people are, they're slowly coming and kind of talking to me, and then like when we have like the community meetings, some people come in, they kind of express their opinions, they're kind of upset, just from, like I said, past issues, whatever. That's what I'm hoping for my community, is to, kind of have bigger gatherings, and like when there's these events and stuff, I want them to come and be involved. Being a leader to me is just everybody around me, I would put them first. I'm not getting paid for it. I'm doing this out of, my heart and, for my community.
Leslie, as a board member of the Wyola Development Fund, met with Grace to discuss how the fund and the Development Authority complement each other and allows for Wyola's economy to grow in a way that works for the community. The following is from Leslie and Grace's discussion, as Leslie drew out a chart of the triangulated economic system, the public sector, private sector, and the nonprofit sector. Leslie and Grace discussed how this system can apply for Wyola and the need for all sectors to work in partnership to strengthen the overall impact.
So we have people in the community, hard workers, know how to do stuff, but we're not familiar with how to drive this machine. If we can understand this, we can drive hell out of it. It's just like when we got the horse, we learned how to ride hell out of it, We did a lot of things that were innovative and responsive to the setting that we were in.
Leslie then references the relay track and the other components connected to it, including the markets and other public gathering opportunities, as a major component of the community's proposed private sector.
This track, as a critical infrastructure to our community, represents a huge private sector stake. When we were originally starting, we were thinking what people said, we need a laundromat, we need a gas station, we need a grocery store, and a coffee shop. In order to prompt those enterprises, you got to have individuals that are willing to say, I'll step up and take a $200,000 bank loan. I will start that business. And we weren't ready for that. But Wyola had 7 Indian relay teams, as little as we are, and it was like, oh my God, this is what we know how to do. This is an economic enterprise that our community members inherently have a powerful knowledge and history and experience to bring to bear to make it successful. And we don't need to have external expertise to tell us how to make it work.
Leslie speaks with Grace about the dynamics of the work taking place in the Mighty Few district in relation to the Crow Nation and the tribal government.
Just because we have these entities does not mean we are divorcing our nation. Right. Apsáalooke Nation is our parent, but we are standing up as adult functional children and putting down our own teepee stakes and saying, this is what we need to have in order to live in the place that we're in. We can do it, but we need the encouragement and the support. In all this planning and collaborating and unifying, it's going to help us understand that when the Development Authority gets money, is not going to shortchange anybody else. We should be focusing on our priorities, not who's got what. We all need to work together to now go bring down the buffalo. We can build cooperation, collaboration, because we will not be under the strain and the stress anymore of trying to survive. Right. Because we are in survival mode. But our community's spirit needs to have visual indicators that we are not where we were. Right. I really think that the next thing would be we'd have more opportunity than we have people. Right. Which is a great problem to have, but our people right now have no opportunities. So we can meet on Sunday, we can workshop it, the priorities, identify who does what.
We close out this episode with some final words from Leslie about the overall motivator of all the community work and programs moving forward for the Mighty Few.
That's part of the identity of our community historically and what we're reviving today. It's our leadership, our horsemanship, our culture, all of those things are a part of the identity of this community that are really powerful, and we want that to be active and alive and well.
I hope this episode has shown just how true it is that when local residents guide the work that takes place in a community, it will naturally be holistic. Only residents know how to touch on health, economy, environment, social well-being, and more with each single program in a way that's meaningful, engaging, and self-sustaining for the community members. This concludes part 1 of the 2-part podcast on the Mighty Few community. Keep an eye out for part 2, which will look at youth empowerment, including the Wyola Mighty Few Youth Group, connections to the land, language, and traditional lifeways, and folks will share about what approaches are necessary for the mentioned programs to move forward. Do subscribe to the Stories for Action podcast here to make sure you're notified when part 2 is released, which should be next week. Thank you so much to everyone who spoke with us for these interviews, and thank you to the Mighty Few community for sharing your place and stories with us. For listeners, you can find links to all of the things mentioned here today in this episode's show notes, including the Mighty Few Community Development Authority, and you can follow the Wyola Development Fund and Wyola Youth Group on Facebook. You can learn more, get involved, or find out how to support these efforts. Find the Mighty Few film episode of Life in the Land at lifeintheland.org. Thank you so much to Robin Iron and Rachel Mailbear Stone for production support in the field on these episodes and on the film. And thank you to Jorie LaFrance for her narration and contributing writing on this episode, and additional writing from Marina Weatherly. You can find all of the films and podcasts that are part of the Life in the Land project at lifeintheland.org. Reach out if you would like to incorporate a film episode into an upcoming meeting, gathering, or in the classroom, all for free. Stories for Action can also provide support in facilitating a discussion or hosting a story workshop for your group or classroom after the film. I'm also excited to announce that we now have official curriculum to accompany any of the Life in the Land films, And we can provide you with a free, customizable lesson plan. All of this created with support from our Outreach and Education Associate, Shani Sekam. This curriculum is for high school, college, or adult education, and Stories for Action can also offer residencies or workshops in the classroom, working with students to elevate their own story or experience through any medium, and include intro film production with hands-on instruction in camera, audio, and lighting. Reach out at info@storiesforaction.org to learn more. This second season of the Life in the Land project is generously supported by the Greater Montana Foundation, the Crocus Foundation, Bioregions International, the Nature Conservancy, Montana Watershed Coordination Council, Montana Forest Collaboration Network, Foundation for Community Vitality, Courtney Scott, and Kestrel Ariel, with additional support from Blackfoot Communications, Heart of the Rockies Initiative, Northern Great Plains Joint Venture, Sarah Rubik, Rodney Fry, Beth Madden, Gary Whitted, Fernanda Robert, Bill Long and Billy Miller, and Kathy Messer. Find out more about all of our work, including films and storytelling workshops, at storiesforaction.org, and check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Stories for Action. Thank you all so much for listening and being a part of our community, where our mission is to spark positive change for people and place through the power of storytelling.